Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon, the podcast, where we dive deep into all things health and wellness to help you find health and healing inside and out for now and forever.
Hello and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root with Megan and Shannon. I am Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice, Trifecta Collective, and today it's just me. So you get me for the full, hour or so that we are together. And today, because I'm doing a solo episode, I wanted to dive into a little bit deeper into some of the things that we talked about in our weight loss episode. And specifically, I want to talk about weight loss and working out, strength training versus cardio and group exercise programming, actual strength training programming, nutrition for strength training, metabolic flexibility, and then also reverse dieting. So a lot to cover today, and I have a lot of experience in this world, almost a decade. In just a couple months, it will be 10 years since I've been in the health and wellness industry. And just to give you guys a little bit of background, a little bit more background maybe, as to kind of how I got into the health and wellness industry and a lot of my experience in more of the fitness, I'll even say like fitness, weight loss, nutrition coaching space. And nutrition coaching, I mean more of body recomposition versus holistic health space. So to give you a little bit of background, I got into the personal training world back in 2015, early 2015, after I had noticed a really big difference. I was facing burnout in the business that I was running at the time and started making some changes myself. I was still on anti-anxiety and antidepressants and they weren't doing great at their job. I never found, out of all of the combinations I never found a great combination. I always tell people the best I ever felt was like a zombie. The worst was pretty dark. And after I really got into strength training at this point in time, kind of, like when I was about 24, that's when I really started noticing a difference in my mental health. And at this point in time, I was starting to feel good enough to get off of my meds. And for the first time in a decade. And I successfully did that. I was forced to do it by myself. Please never do it by yourself. There are people out there who will help you find someone because it is well worth it. It's not a fun experience coming off, but I was able to come off and I was able to stay off. And this is where I found my true love of fitness, of strength training, of just like health and wellness overall. And it wasn't from, an aesthetic standpoint, it was really just the impact that it had on my mental and emotional health was so huge. That's where I found my love. And that's unusual. Most of the trainers that I've ever worked with or who worked for me at various times in my career, it was usually aesthetic reasons as to how and why they got into this space. Maybe they were competitors or athletes. And it's a little different. And I think, for me, one of the reasons I've been able to be so consistent in just say my movement practice overall is because I notice such a big difference in my mental and emotional health, among many other things. And for me, like it helps keep chronic pain issues away and help fix my chronic pain issues, largely fix those issues, which I'll get into here. But that's a really big piece of this. And I can tell you I manage gyms, I manage fitness companies. The people who are always the most consistent were people who made that connection. And so if you hate movement, if you hate working out, if you hate the gym, we're going to talk a lot about that today overall. And the more you can tie, and this really goes with pretty much any habit out there, but really when it comes to the working out and I would say and nutrition piece, the more you can tie these good habits into how it makes you feel the more consistent you're likely to be, especially long term. So a little food for thought there. So I got into the space. I was still running my business. I had a business partner at that time, and we had worked it out where I was able to go into a gym, and I worked at a big box gym as a personal trainer, like super part-time. Just, I loved it. I was two different people. I was the person, excuse my language, but I was the bitch of the office. In the company that I was running, I was never happy. I was always in a bad mood. I was, first in a lot of ways. I was just not a happy person. And then as soon as I would get to the gym in my later afternoons, I was a different person. And that's when I really started to notice how, this was the career for me. This was the shift I wanted to make. It took time to make that happen. And I knew it was the right choice for me. And so I did personal training, and I did more general population kind of work, weight loss kind of pieces. And then I started getting into more group training and did both, more boot camp styles training. I got trained as a Race Mills group instructor for the program Grit, which is if you're not familiar, 30-minute, very, very high intensity style of working out. Then I moved into gym management and was still teaching some group stuff, was still doing tiny bit of personal training, more of just overall gym management. And then moved out of that into back into personal training, and then got into kickboxing and did more of cardio style kickboxing classes with a really floor length bag. And then I got my MMA conditioning specialty and did that. I was also, at some point during that time, I also specialized in advanced age population and did a lot of work in additional education around training people in advanced age, which I have some of my favorite work that I ever did throughout my entire career as a personal trainer. Loved working with people just over 60, 70 years old. I had someone in their late 80s with the oldest kind I ever worked with. And just, he was one of my all-time favorites. Just the best stories. And then, then I did more kickboxing, traditional style kickboxing and boxing style classes along with boot camp. And then I managed a mobile personal training company for many years. So quite a bit of experience here. And I have I've taken such a wide variety of trainings in that world and specialties. I was in a car accident, and that's kind of when things really shifted for me. And I wasn't able to do a lot. I started having chronic back pain shortly after that within a couple of hours of that car accident, chronic back pain. I've lost, if you've listened to my story, sorry, I'm repeating myself, but I lost feeling in my right leg for almost a year. And then it turned into sciatic pain with tingling, numbness, sharp shooting pain, back pain. I ended up with bursitis in my hips, and I had many, many procedures. Western medicine, I went to all of the people, chiropractors, orthopedic doctors, orthopedic surgeons. I went through 8 physical therapists. I was in physical therapy, 2 to 4 times a week, dry needling, TENS units, you name it, I probably tried it. And nothing really, really cut it. And it got to the point, I had 9 procedures on my back. I had a couple of injections on my hip. Minor relief, definitely not full relief. And I started getting really into mobility work, more of the functional style of training. And I had gone through, if you're familiar with this space, there's a corrective exercise program from NASM, which is pretty well renowned and well respected. That was fine. I learned some, implemented some. It still didn't see great results. And it wasn't until I found a company, and it's really a group of guys who have tons of experience in the training space, called Mind Pump. And when I found them and started really understanding, they have 2 programs, MAPS Prime Pro and MAPS Prime. And I got those programs, and it was an elevated form of corrective exercise. And they worked with a physical therapist who was super good. And, what I really started to understand is while I had low back pain, I also had, excuse me, a lot of dysfunction in my feet, in my foot strength, foot mobility, just in how I used my feet, in my ankles, in my hip mobility, in my mid-back mobility, in my shoulder mobility, especially because I was in a car accident and there was a lot of restriction from where the seatbelt was, even though my airbag did not deploy. And just like everything was so interconnected. And when I started really looking at all of the pieces all together and putting that together in my own healing journey, that's when things really started to shift and change. Now, there was also a lot of stuff going on internally that was exacerbating everything. And certainly I've shared that piece of my story quite a bit, but this functional movement, corrective exercise style of work, and then not only doing that, like fixing these imbalances in my body and then going back in and strengthening everything. And that is the piece that I often see missing, especially in physical therapy. And, I so much respect to physical therapists. They're also Western medicine and they have their limitations, and they, with insurance, they are really only supposed to look at one piece of your body, whatever piece of your body is hurting. And that's not always the reason why you're actually hurting. Just because you hurt in one area doesn't mean it's that area that's actually the issue. There's a lot of other things because our whole body's connected, and that makes a really big difference. And so I went really down that rabbit hole. I specialized in functional movement, specialized in chronic pain, helped other people get out of chronic pain issues, completely reversed a whole bunch of issues, worked with a lot of special populations like an RA. I had quite a few clients who had an RA, and there's a lot of special considerations to be taken into account. Same thing with a lot of people with hypermobility issues, EDS type issues. And I loved it so much. And even when I started this practice, really my specialty was chronic pain and kind of supporting from a nutritional perspective and then also from a movement perspective. How can we help the body heal and help the body get out of pain? So, and then I'll just another layer into this. Before my car accident, I was very into the bodybuilding space. I loved bodybuilding workouts. Before my accident, I was preparing to go into a bodybuilding show, into the physique category, if you're familiar with this. And I had worked with a very well-respected coach in this space, and also learned a lot during that time as far as like weight loss and how people do it wrong, and how people can really do some serious damage to their bodies that we see more in the bodybuilding space, but I see this all the time now in just general population, specifically among women. And I'm going to talk about this piece too here. And if you go, you have to go really far back on Instagram to look at this, but I did a 1-year difference picture. And I'll never forget this. And I had been working with this coach for several months at this point. I had lost a good amount of weight, good amount of body fat, but I didn't look great. I was very like cellulite-y. I just did not look very good. And the program that I was on with this coach, largely I was eating about 12 to 1400 calories. I was strength training 5 days a week. Some of those workouts were anywhere between an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. And then doing an additional anywhere between 1 to 4 hours a week of cardio on top of that. Plus, I was working as a personal trainer and group instructor. So I was very active. I was living a very active life. And once again, I lost the weight. I lost some weight and my body transformed a little bit. And I did not look good. And the picture from a year later, I was eating anywhere between about 1900 to 2100 calories. Was doing, I think 2 to 3 HIIT workouts a week. I was strength training like 4 or 5 days a week. I was definitely still over exercising, but there is a noticeable difference in how I looked. And I looked so much better. I had abs. Like I was just tighter overall. And it was such a big difference. And throughout this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit more about why that is and why we really oftentimes need to look more at fat loss, body recomposition versus just strict weight loss. Because just because we see a number on the scale doesn't mean that's how we want to look. And for most people, now this may not be everyone, but for most people, we care more about how we look and how we feel versus a number on the scale. Or that's really what we do care more about, even if we think we might care about the number on the scale. You know, my weight, and I think I shared this on the weight loss episode, but my weight does not change very much. And I can look totally different at the exact same weight. And that's largely because of body composition. How much body fat do I have? How much muscle do I have? Like, what does that ratio look like? And it's just different. And most people are looking for more of the quote unquote tone kind of look. They want to look a particular way. They want to fit in a size of clothing. And that may not be reflective of what's on the scale. And I think that's a really important distinction. And I also encourage you, if this sounds like you, don't let doctors scare you or shame you or guilt you. I can't tell you the number of times that I was told I was obese at my fittest, most muscular, lowest body fat percentage. I mean, I had abs when I was told by a physician that I was obese. And that's because my BMI was technically in the obese category, even though my body fat was sub 20%. And I said, please look at me. Do I look like I'm obese? And so, I just think that's a really important distinction. And then also another place where Western medicine gets something else wrong. BMI is not accurate. It's not a very good representation of our actual health and what a healthy weight or body composition really looks like here. So, important difference here. I'll also say, if you are looking to just find a number on the scale, nutrition is going to be far more important than movement overall. Now, I will say for longevity, for overall health, the movement piece is essential. If you want to live a long time, if you want to feel really good in your body, if you want to look a particular way, if you want more of like this tone kind of look, the working out piece is non-negotiable. And now this looks really different for different people. And I'm going to dig into this here. I'm going to do like a whole thing on workout programming and what this can look like and some of my suggestions and recommendations. So yeah, nutrition, calories in, calories out, obviously it is important. It is also not the only thing that makes a big difference. And one of the pieces I want to talk about kind of later on is the metabolic flexibility. And the more muscle you have, the more flexibility you have in your nutrition. And there's a lot of value in that. I'll also tell you one of the reasons why I don't count calories. I generally know about what I'm eating. I tracked for so long that I can give you a pretty good estimate. I still do largely measure out a lot of my protein. I can guesstimate just because I've tracked for so long that I know about what I'm getting. And protein's the only thing that I really is high on my list just because it's so important. Once again, go back and listen to the episode. I'll certainly chat more about that here when I get into macros, reverse dieting, and nutrition. So the next piece here I want to talk about is strength training. So strength training, we talk about strength training, and probably a better word for this is resistance training. This is by far one of the best things that you can do. And there is a very low barrier to entry to get into this. And if you really are concerned about your health long term, about your bone density, about, certainly we can look like, obviously, our physical standpoint, our physique, what does that look like? Resistance training is, once again, almost non-negotiable in my book. If you want to stay healthy. all movement. Cables are really valuable. There's a lot of ways to do this. And the most important thing is just doing it. I do not consider walking strength training. Not that there's not value in walking, because I think walking is the lowest barrier of entry and one of the best forms of movement that is out there. There's so much value in walking, especially walking outside. And it's not strength training, in my opinion. Even if you carry your little weights, not the biggest fan of that as a form of strength training. It does not fall into that category for me personally. And this will depend on who you talk to. This is more falling into the category of what we call NEAT, which is just like regular movement that we're getting in our lives, looking at steps, that kind of stuff, like daily activity. Which is also very, very important. If you ever work with a nutrition or macro coach or some sort of personal trainer, they'll oftentimes have you track your steps and look at your NEAT, your daily just movement and activity. And one of the biggest reasons, if we think about people always say in my early 20s, I could eat whatever I wanted to. I didn't need to go to the gym and, all of these things. And I, looked amazing. And then, following those same habits in our mid to late 30s into our 40s and older, they don't do the same thing. And biologically, do you think things change in our body here a little bit? And we have another episode all about aging that will come out. We'll talk more about this, but a lot of this is stress, sleep issues. A lot of the habits that we were doing finally catch up to us. We aren't moving as much. Most of us have sedentary jobs. I have a very sedentary job. I'm sitting at my computer most of the time, and to get movement, it has to be intentional. And that's just kind of how it works for the vast majority of us. I think another important thing to really understand, and I want to get into group training here a little bit because I think it's really important to talk more about this. And I touched on this in the weight loss episode. Our bodies adapt very quickly. And this, people who want to see physical changes, and many of the clients I've worked with over the years, they fight me on this, and I understand where they're coming from. And it's really important to understand, look, our bodies adapt, and they adapt quick. From a cardiovascular standpoint, usually we'll say every 2 to 4 weeks, at least the last studies that I've seen, your body's starting to adapt there. So that means that in order to see continued adaptation, something needs to change. And if we're doing the same stimulus, we're not going to see the same results long term because the body's going to adapt. With strength training, usually we'll say 4 to 6 weeks. You have a little bit more flexibility with that. And same thing, if you stop doing cardio, your body's going to go back within about 1 to 2 weeks, and we'll start losing progress cardiovascularly. From a muscular standpoint, strength training standpoint, that's a little bit longer. That's usually about 2 to 3 weeks, and we'll start to see noticeable changes start to happen there. And I've tested this out many, many times personally, and also with clients when I was working with clients in this world. Yeah, this is exactly what happens. And there's another study I'll share just a little bit around this too. But one of the issues when it comes to any sort of group activity is we're not getting the same level of progression. And we're largely doing similar workouts every single time, even if they're moderately different. They're not actually being phased and programmed for long-term sustained change. Now, that being said, I do think there is a lot of value in group training if that's what gets you moving and gets you to do something. There's something about movement in community as a group, other people holding you accountable, having fun and enjoyment in that group environment. I absolutely think there's so much value in that. And especially when I was a group instructor, I saw that. I saw people showing up regularly, making friends, having community, working with me, connecting with me as a group instructor. And there's so much value in that. And once again, if you're looking for long-term change and progression, and I'll even say, like, as we get older, this is really important. There's gonna be limitations to this. And once again, like, look, I was a group instructor that did every 3 months, we did quote unquote a launch, and we had a whole new thing. And then we did that for a month and then started incorporating old tracks. That, look, I get it. I know, I've been there. And look, it's the same. You're largely the same. Even, I'm going to throw a couple of names out there. Once again, I don't think these are bad. And if you're looking for long-term results, like, look, there are some issues here. Orange Theory, F45, like any of these boot camp style classes, burn boot camp, some of these ones that are pretty popular across the board. I've taken all of their classes too, just by the way. So I'm saying this from personal experience. The other issue I have with group classes, and man, did I struggle with this mentally and emotionally the last 6 to 12 months that I was doing a lot of this work, is it's not individualized. And if you have injuries, if you are very deconditioned, I'll say, you shouldn't be in some of these classes. And I did get in trouble for this once, but I'm telling people that, hey, this is actually not the best option for you. You just your form isn't great. And as a group instructor, there's only so much capacity you have to correct form, and you do the best you can. And if people have a ton of injuries, the last thing I ever wanted anything to happen in my classes was for someone to get hurt. I never, ever wanted that. And so it was really just a concern. And the more I became educated, the more I learned, the more issues I had with group classes. Once again, there is a mental and emotional component to this, a community component. So I get it, but I also want to be really clear that if you are looking for long-term sustained results, changes in your body, doing group classes exclusively is probably not going to be the best option for you. So yeah, just want to be super clear on that. So even when we look at strength training, there's so many ways to do this. And when we look at strength training, we really want to look at programming. And here's the other thing. If you go to the gym or work out at home or wherever you're working out, and you do the same thing every time you work out, you use the same weight, same reps, same rest periods, same movements, you're going to hit a wall at some point and you're not going to see the results. Once again, the body adapts. And so we need to force adaptation on the body. And once again, there's a lot of ways to do this. And I'm going to walk through some of the big ones. Obviously, changing what exercises you're doing changes things. Obviously, it's going to be even similar movements, a barbell back squat versus a front squat, very different movements, similar, but very, very different. Even if you're doing dumbbell squats and you do dumbbells with, the dumbbells up by your collarbone versus down by your side, very different movements. Foot positioning of a squat, very different movements here. So even small changes in the actual movements, changes in the actual reps, there's kind of a few main kind of areas that we typically think about when it comes to rep ranges. We have very low rep ranges. Typically we'll consider that a 1 to 5 rep range. This is heavy. When you go heavy, typically we're going to have longer rest periods. We're doing, bigger movements. You're typically not going to go, do 5 reps of a bicep curl. Typically not going to be super effective, but squats, deadlifts, bench press, barbell, something for a row, overhead press, some of the big lifts and big major movements. This is where we'd want to fall into that 1 to 5 rep range as a phase. So when we look at nutrition and strength training, we need to understand a few things. So we need to fuel and send the stimulus to actually build muscle. And this is a really important part of the process. And if we are chronically undereating especially protein, it's going to be very challenging, and we're likely not going to see the benefits of the strength training. We're not going to see the benefits of, in our bone density and the muscle mass, in actual physique changes. And so it's really important that we look at nutrition. And looking at this, there's a lot of ways to do this. And I do think there's a lot of value in counting calories and learning and understanding the nutritional value of different foods. Now, I also understand that we can get very wrapped up in this, and that can cause another whole host of issues, especially mental and emotional issues. We can get really tied to the numbers. We can become obsessive. It can become a really big issue and fall into like this disordered eating pattern. I definitely fell into that category when it came to calorie counting for a really long time, which is by and large why I don't count my calories. I also am not, if I really wanted to go into, hey, I really wanted to change my physique, then I probably would temporarily, and I'd have to really think about and put some limitations on myself and some boundaries and barriers on myself to be able to do that in a healthy way and not become obsessed with it. And so that's really important to understand. And once again, I do think there's a lot of value in just understanding what's in our food. We think if you look at actual protein content of certain foods and some of the more stereotypical foods that are thought of, like eggs. Eggs are a great example. One egg has about 6 grams of protein. And so if you're eating 2 or 3 eggs for breakfast, 12 to 18 grams of protein, which, 20 or 30 grams is a pretty standard recommendation. I'll also say sometimes that's pretty low depending on who you are and what kind of changes you might want to see. So it's real. Once again, I do think there's value in this. And I also think there are a lot of downsides and negativities that can come along with trying to count calories. One of the biggest things that we'll often do in our practice, especially when it comes to protein intake, is looking at the size of your palm. And I know this isn't perfect. It's not meant to be perfect, but aiming for about a palm, and this does depend on the person, 1 to 2 palms of protein per meal. And once again, not perfect, but it just helps to give us a little bit more of an estimate on our protein intake. I'll also sometimes use this for, vegetables. Instead of like measuring out your vegetables, well, how many pounds of vegetables are you getting in a day? Can we get like at least 1 at a meal? Can we get like 2 or 3 at maybe like dinner? So, are we able to manipulate that way? And that's easier. It's less work. It's just easier overall when it comes to the nutrition side of things. The other thing that's really important to understand is if we're already eating low calories, sometimes when we start to add some strength training, we won't see any changes because basically we can't go any lower in our calories without causing more stress on the body. And even where you are right now, if it's pretty low, that may be very stressful on the body. The body needs nutrients. The body needs calories, especially if you are a menstruating woman. Like, look, we need calories. We need carbohydrates, in my opinion, to have proper and very healthy hormones. And this doesn't mean like go crazy and like eat all of the pasta. That's not what they're talking about. Just, people who do ketogenic diets long-term, I've seen the harm in the hormone health for menstruating women when it comes to this kind of work. And once again, like there's a big mental and emotional component to this. So that's really important to understand. But a lot of times, and you'll see this for, if you look at like anyone or a lot of people in health, like fitness space specifically, they'll talk about reverse dieting. And basically what it is you're trying to change how the baseline number of calories your body needs to operate. And this is often coupled with strength training. And the reason why is our muscles, as we build more muscle, building muscle requires calories. Maintaining muscle also requires calories. And this is one of the secrets to staying a very similar weight. And this has been a huge secret of mine. I've been very consistent with my strength training. My weight had largely over the past 10 years has not changed very much at all. I mean, we're talking like 5 to 10 pounds at most, given where I was at the time. And once again, I could look totally different. And a lot of that depended on what was my workout routine, what did my nutrition look like. And a big reason why I don't, especially in the last, we'll say like 3 to 5 years, why I haven't had to focus a lot on nutrition, outside of just prioritizing protein. I focus on whole foods. It's much harder to overeat whole foods than it is to eat processed foods. Just it's gonna fill you up a little bit more. You can eat a bag of potato chips, but try and eat like 6 potatoes. Like, good luck. You're gonna fill up real quick on those whole potatoes versus I forget what is in the standard bag of potato chips, but I think it's right around 6 or so. So it makes a really big difference. And that's because I have a baseline of muscle that I worked really hard to build for many years. And now I don't have to. I'm just coming off of a month, about 4 or 5 weeks of not strength training, of not being in a gym. And my weight has not changed. Visually speaking, I have not actually weighed myself, because I just don't care. But visually, my body composition has not changed really at all. And, maybe I'm a little softer in a couple of areas, but barely, if any. And that's because I have this baseline of muscle. And if you can work, and the younger you are, yes, the easier it is. But if you can build up this baseline, that gives you a lot of flexibility. And reverse dieting, we're really striving to get you that flexibility of, hey, can we slowly, and it should be really slow. And look, like this process can take 6, 12, 18 months. And it largely depends on where you are right now and who you talk to and the coach, you work with. But, reverse dieting, coupled with strength training, let's say you're eating 12 to 1400 calories, which look is too low, not enough calories. Like 1400 was the absolute lowest I think I ever went for any of my clients ever in this kind of space. And 1500 calories was a little bit safer as my low end baseline. But if we can work up to getting someone to be able to eat 2000, 22, 2500, 3000 calories and not actually be gaining any weight, gosh, does that go such a long way? And that gives you so much flexibility that when you do start to actively work on the fat loss, weight loss process, you're so set, and if you can be losing weight at 2500, 2200 calories, 2000 calories, I mean, that's a very comfortable place where you are well fed, you're not starving, you still have energy, you're going to still sleep well and still get all of your nutrients that your body actually needs. And that's going to make a really big difference. And this is a really important process that, yes, it does take a long time. And the value of it, I cannot express the amount of value that this can really have in your physical appearance, but also in just your overall health. And once again, this is going to give you a lot of flexibility where if you do need to take a month off, a week off, if you want to go celebrate and go a little crazy during the holidays of eating your favorite things, go for it, because your weight's not going to change drastically. And even if you do gain, let's say 5 pounds, man, is it easy to get it off, going back onto more of your normal, quote unquote, normal nutritional type of plan. So, these are just some things to really think about. And I do think there's a lot of miseducation still. And I think it's a lot better than it was when I first got into this space, but I still feel like there's some miseducation that goes along here. So just really important to understand this and just have knowledge around this. So I'll also say it's never too late. I started working with someone when they were like 85, 86, and they built muscle and we saw results and we saw, them having better balance, feeling more confident and being able to walk around. all of that's super, super important in just like our daily lives. The other thing for me, especially as I got into functional training, I started thinking about the longevity piece of, what exercises do I want to incorporate? How do I want to look at the body and how do I want to program the body from a workout perspective to facilitate long-term health? And there are 5 main areas that I really focus on. And I'll tell you, I still do this for myself personally. And that's, big things. I want to be able to sit and stand. I want to be able to get out of a car. I want to be able to go to the bathroom. I just want to be able to sit in a chair and stand up out of a chair without major difficulty. And so what does that look like? Well, that looks like squat and squat variations. I want to be able to bend down and pick things up off the ground without throwing out my back. I want to be able to carry things, and that looks like deadlift and deadlift variations. I want to be able to reach up overhead, all the way up overhead without struggling and without pain. And so what does that look like? Overhead presses. I want to be able to pull things and have really good posture. So this largely looks like rows. And how do I, train my back so that I stay in a really good postural position? And then if I ever fall, I want to be able to push myself up off the ground. And that looks like a press or like a chest press, push up, that kind of presses. The other thing that's really important for me, and those are kind of like the 5 main areas. And if you're familiar with strength training, especially like powerlifting or bodybuilding, those are like the considered 5 of the main lifts that are out there. The other piece for me, and this is where I saw a lot of people when I worked in the chronic pain space of people having issues, is twisting. They'd reach back in their car to get something, to talk to one of their children, just grabbed a dog, a bag of dog food and like twist to pick it up and put it somewhere and then throw out their back. So the rotational piece is also really important for me. And I for me personally, I train, rotation, anti-rotation, that can look like wood choppers, windmills. If we think about anti-rotation, like farmers carries, overhead carries, like different types of suitcase carries, different types of carries. Pull-up presses are really great. Those are a really simple one, super good for balance as well. So those are just some ideas here. And that's largely how I like to program any workout programming we do for clients. That's largely, some of the things that I'm thinking about. The other thing I want to say is just doing something once a week, that goes a really long way. And it's, I think Shannon brought this up on the weight loss episode of, she'll do a couple times a week for like 20 or 30 minutes. Like, great. For me, once again, I've taken some time off of the gym. I've done this too many times that I would like to admit, but I've overdone it, kind of even just taking a few days or a week off, going back too hard in the gym. And so for me, I'm really trying to follow my own advice of, my workouts are being about 30, 35 minutes, pretty low weight, lower, once again, like lower than I'd like to do, especially, I got to check my ego. I've been strength training a long time, and sometimes my ego is like, lift all the heavy weights, you could do it. I'm not doing it on purpose because I could hurt myself, but 2, I don't want to be terribly sore. That's also not great for your body. And, doing 2 or 3 times a week, kind of as an entry point and making sure, keeping an eye on my sleep. If I notice my sleep starts to go down, that's a sign that I'm overtraining. It's also a really good sign if you're tired after a workout, if you don't get good sleep on the nights that you work out, it's a sign of overtraining. So something just really valuable to really think about. So that's a lot of the big stuff when it comes to training. I'll also say, and, I could do many, many, many episodes on this topic overall, but just another thing I'm not the biggest fan of is, I know there's a lot of talk about, especially for menstruating women, working out for your cycle and where you are in your cycle. And while I logically can understand the value in that, I've also worked with too many clients over the years that this is not a great idea. And it's a consistency issue. Doing yoga for a week, doing Pilates for a week, doing strength training for a week, like, cool, that sounds good. And the number of people that I could barely get to come into a gym once a week was too much. That, being like, hey, come to the gym this week, don't come to the gym, this other week, do this other thing. the consistency is really important. And once again, even if it's just once a week of doing some sort of workout, that's amazing and great and goes so, so, so far for your overall health and well-being. So just wanted to throw that out there. And once again, I get it. Like I understand biologically speaking and physiologically what's going on in the body at different points and times throughout our cycles and the benefits of doing that. And from a consistency standpoint, I just see so many issues there. So those are just some thoughts. The other thing I'll say is if you want specific workout programming, my best recommendation is listen to Mind Pump. They have a podcast. They have thousands of episodes at this point. I started listening right around episode 500. Have been a huge fan of theirs ever since. I have many of their programs, like probably 10 or 12 of their programs. I've run a lot of their programs personally. I've run it with clients. Some of them I've run multiple times. I'm a huge fan. We do have an affiliate link, just because I am a big fan of theirs. And if you do want workout programming and a really good programming, and I think their pricing is extremely, extremely reasonable for the amount of information and everything that they have in their programs, I think is very reasonable. So I will put that in the show notes, but also just listen to their podcast. They also have tons of YouTube videos of different videos of exercises, talking about different exercises, benefits of exercises. So I'm a massive fan of theirs. So go check all of their stuff out. They have, decades and decades and decades of experience between all of them. I also just, from my experience and having listened to them, and I don't listen to them all the time anymore. Nothing against them. It's just a matter of time. And I just don't listen to as many podcasts now. So I just don't keep up with as much of it. And some of the things gets a little repetitive over time, especially like their Q&A kind of stuff. When you've been listening for over 1,000 episodes. So, but yeah, their stuff is absolutely amazing. And if you're interested in learning more about, a lot of my philosophies, and I don't agree with everything that they say, especially I do not agree with many of the things that they share around the holistic health space. I and some of their partners in that space, I don't love all of them. But I think by and large, when it comes to workout programming and their actual programs and how they talk about health and fitness and working out, it's so, so good. And they have way more information that we could provide just on this podcast. Especially since we talk about so many other things. So be sure to go check them out. If you have any other questions around this topic, please don't hesitate to ask. Like I said, happy to do another episode on this. Shannon and I could do another episode together as well. So if you have any other questions, comment, DM us, feel free to shoot us an email. We're more than happy to answer to the best of our ability. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to stay tuned for next week. Shannon will be back next week. Thank you for listening. As always, like, subscribe, follow. If it resonates, a 5-star review really, really, really means a lot to us. And thank you for joining me. We'll see you next week.